We continue our study of Genesis, and we are in the 30th chapter of Genesis. We have already seen one tragic event, and then there's an interlude in chapter 29 where we find Jacob meeting Rachel, which is a humorous account of what took place. And then we see Laban's treachery in chapter 29, a hint of what's to come as it stands. And then the latter part of the chapter, we also find that Leah's having children and Rachel's having a lot of problems having children. In fact, her womb is barren at this point, and so there's some competition going on there. And chapter 30 continues that competition, that tension that exists between the two sisters. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she became jealous of her sister. And she said to Jacob, "Give me children or else I die." Now you talk about pressure. That's a lot of pressure. There's jealousy on the part of Rachel against her sister. There is distress on her part because in the ancient Near East, if a woman did not bear children, it was considered a reproach and a shame. And there was also frustration at the entire situation as it existed. Then Jacob's anger burned against Rachel. Now that's unusual. Up to this point, Jacob would do anything at all for his wife, the one that he really, really loved, Rachel. But now he's angry. And he said, "Am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" This indicates to me that this is not just a one-time conversation that they've had. This is not the first time that this conversation has gone on between Jacob and Rachel. This thing has been building for a while. And so now Jacob has had enough of it. He has found it extremely difficult to give any comfort to Rachel, and his frustration boils over. She said, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Go in to her that she may bear on my knees, that through her I too may have children." Now to the 21st century vantage point, this is extremely unusual. What is this? We're not used to something like this. This, however, is a Near Eastern custom of adoption. If a woman was not able to have children, then she could designate someone as a concubine for her husband, and they would then come together, and then the child would be birthed at the knees of the wife, as she describes here. That is a recognized custom, legal and binding, of adopting children. The wife would then adopt the baby that is born. It would be hers. It would not be the concubine's. And so that's what she's describing. And so verse 4 says, "So she gave him her maid Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob went into her." Now Moses calls her a wife. But in context, and as we will see also later, she is a concubine. And at this point, in the patriarchal system, in the patriarchal age, the Lord allowed such arrangements. We know that to be the case. And so here we see this arrangement being made for Rachel to have children. Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, "God has vindicated me, and has indeed heard my voice, and has given me a son." Therefore she named him Dan. The name Dan means God has judged or God has vindicated. You see the pattern here. We've already seen it to an extent in the last chapter on the names being similar to Hebrew words. Well, this is the same process here. What she says is the name that's given to the son that's born, to the child that's born. Verse 7, Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. So Jacob said, "With mighty wrestlings," notice that word, "I have wrestled with my sister, and I have indeed prevailed." The word that's translated wrestlings in the Hebrew is the word niphtali, if I can pronounce it correctly. Niphtali. Notice, she named him Naphtali. Notice the similarity, Naphtali and Naphtali. So, verse 9 says, when Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took her maid Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Here's the competition. Competition between the two sisters. Leah is now wanting to outdo Rachel. She sees what Rachel's up to, so she decides she's going to do the same thing. Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, how fortunate. How fortunate. And so she named him Gad. The name Gad means good fortune. So she says, how fortunate. That's the name. Gad, good fortune. Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, happy am I. Notice that. For women will call me happy. So she named him Asher. The name Asher means happy. You see the pattern. You see what they're doing here. You get the picture. Now in the days of wheat harvest, the days of wheat harvest in our way of reckoning time would be about May of the year. So this is in May of the year. Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Now, what are mandrakes? Mandrakes was an herb that was used in fertility. That is, it was known to be an aphrodisiac. So it was very highly prized possession from both a husband and a wife to have mandrakes. And so Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. Oh, she shouldn't have said that. Watch this. But she said to her, is it a small matter for you to take my husband, and would you take my son's mandrakes also? Whoa, here we go. Sisters at each other, Leah and Rachel. Leah is frustrated over the entire situation, going all the way back to when she married Jacob, and then Jacob married Rachel. All this boils over. This is not going to be the last time you see frustrations boil over. We've already seen it with Jacob against Rachel. Now we're seeing it with Leah against Rachel. Later on, we're going to see it again. This inter-family squabbling reaches a fever pitch at a future point. So, it says, Rachel said, therefore he may lie with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes. Now what does that tell you? Look at this. He may lie with, Rachel is giving Leah permission, as it stands, to lie with her husband. Now that just really shines a light on this whole situation, this whole complex, tense, potentially tragic situation as it exists. And so, verse 16, when Jacob came in from the field in the evening, then Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes. And Jacob, what in the world? I'm sure he reacted, what's going on here? Jacob is now forced to be a mere pawn in all this. He is a pawn being used between the two sisters, between his two wives. They're battling back and forth, and they're using Jacob. And so he lay with her that night. That's tragic, isn't it? I look at this as a tragic situation. Yes, sir. We don't have any indication that Moses gives as to what gave her this prerogative, or at least in her mind, the prerogative to take the clamp down on this situation for her to dictate to her sister Leah and all of this. Perhaps she just considered, well, since I'm the favored wife, then I have privileged status. Moses doesn't tell us that. There's a lot of things that's hinted at in the context. There's things that possibly are implied in the context in this whole situation. But my hunch would be that Rachel considered herself to be privileged. That she considered that since she knew that Jacob favored her over her sister, that she had the upper hand. And so Leah, that's one reason why Leah's anger boiled over, and that when she lashed out at her. Going all the way back to the original time when they got married. It's just a whole situation that's just fraught with tension. It's fraught with all of this angst, if you want to put it that way, and potential anger. So it's a situation that could easily explode if it's not handled correctly, and it's close to that point at this juncture. So verse 17 says, God gave heed to Leah. Notice, now God's still with them in this. And all of this tension and all this family squabbling and all of what's going on, God is still with them. God gave heed to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Then Leah said, God has given, notice that word, given me my wages because I gave my maid to my husband. The word given in the Hebrew is the word sakar. Sakar. Notice, so she named him Issachar. You see the similarity. Leah conceived again and bore a sixth son to Jacob. Then Leah said, God has endowed me, notice that word, with a good gift. Now my husband will dwell with me because I bore him 6 sons. The word translated endowed in the New American Standard is the Hebrew word zabal. Zabal. So she named him Zebulun. Notice the similarity in the words. Afterward she bore a daughter and named her Dinah. It's interesting, that name Dinah. Clyde Woods in his commentary says that it may mean, that is, the word Dinah may mean rights controversy. That's interesting. I would like to know what Brother Woods says about that name as far as the difficulty it seems in translating it, because that's as far as he goes. It may mean this. Rights controversy. Interesting. Then God remembered Rachel, and God gave heed to her and opened her womb. Again, failure to bear a son carried a stigma of the ancient Near East, and so God hears her. So she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. She named him Joseph. Hebrew is Yosef, is how you pronounce that in the Hebrew. Saying, may the Lord give me another son. The word Joseph means he adds. He adds. So Rachel is thankful for this son, Joseph, who will factor prominently in the latter part of our book, of the book of Genesis. But she's also looking forward to having even another son. So that's all wrapped up in this. Verse 25. Now it came about when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, send me away that I may go to my own place and to my own country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me depart, for you yourself know my service which I have rendered you. Now think about this. All this time, Jacob has been serving Laban. All of this time. Jacob's ready to go back to his kindred. He's ready to go back home. But Laban said to him, if now it pleases you, that is, if I have found favor in your eyes, stay with me. I have divined that the Lord has blessed me on your account. Notice, I have divined. What does that mean? That means he's been involved in some divination. Laban was an idolater. That is, well, he acknowledged the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, yes, but he also worshiped his own idol gods. And so what he was doing is he was using this divination process to try to foresee the future, and he says, well, I've divined, the Lord has blessed me on your account. He continued, name me your wages and I will give it. But he said to him, you yourself know how I have served you and how your cattle have fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased to a multitude. And the Lord has blessed you wherever I turn. But now when shall I provide for my own household also? Jacob says, I've got my own house. I've got all these children. I've got all these sons and this daughter to take care of. And I need to go. I need to leave. So he said, what shall I give you? And Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this one thing for me, I will again pasture and keep your flock. Let me pass through your entire flock today, removing from there every speckled and spotted sheep. Sheep normally were white. and every black one among the lambs, and the spotted and speckled among the goats. The goats were normally not spotted and speckled. It's taking away all those that have these deformities as far as their color is concerned of their coats. And such shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later when you come concerning my wages. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, will be considered stolen. Now, get that in your head. This is what he suggests. Laban said, "Good, let it be according to your word." So he removed on that day the striped and spotted male goats and all the speckled and spotted female goats, every one with white in it, and all the black ones according among the sheep, and gave them into the care of his sons, and he put a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob. And Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Now what's going on here? Laban is trying to pull a fast one on his son-in-law. The con man has kicked in. Again, he's trying to pull one on him. Then Jacob took fresh rods of poplar and almond and plane trees and peeled white stripes in them, exposing the white which was in the rods. He set the rods which he had peeled in front of the flocks in the gutters, even in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink. And they mated when they came to drink. So the flocks mated by the rods, and the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. Now this entire situation that's described by Moses is extremely foreign to us. What's going on here? Does he believe that this is going to automatically make these lambs and these goats change colors? Well, no. What's the explanation? The explanation is given in the next chapter that we will see, chapter 31, where it's explained that God's hand was in this. God was the one directing Jacob to do this. So it was God doing it, but Jacob was simply carrying out what the Lord had wanted him to do. Notice further. Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face toward the striped and all the black in the flock of Laban, and he put his own herds apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. He's influencing breeding, in other words. God having a hand in it, God directing this, Jacob carrying it out. Moreover, whenever the stronger of the flock were mating, Jacob would place the rods in the side of the flock in the gutter so that they might mate by the rods. But when the flock was feeble, he did not put them in. So the feebler were Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. What's going on? Well, you've got two con men going at it. Laban being the bigger con man than Jacob. Jacob had been involved in deception before with his dad, but the Lord is with Jacob. That's the whole point. But he's utilizing Jacob's shrewdness to be able to get one up on Laban. So the man, that is Jacob, became exceedingly prosperous and had large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. So he prospers just like Abraham, just like Isaac. He's doing just like his ancestors. And as we're going to see, the Lord's hand is in all of this. Any questions, comments before we get into chapter 31? Very unusual customs that are described by Moses. Moses has a gift to see the detail. And the Holy Spirit utilized that gift that Moses had. Moses, remember, was trained to be a writer. In the education he received from Egypt, he was trained to be a Pharaoh overall. But one of the aspects of being a Pharaoh was being able to write. He was very much able to write and had an eye for seeing details. And that's what we see at work here. Chapter 31. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what belonged to our father he's made all this wealth. That's an exaggeration. That's an exaggeration. In other words, Jacob hasn't fallen for the same thing that Laban has done to other people. This is not the first rodeo that Laban's had with this kind of thing, in other words. And his sons aren't used to this. He's supposed to not be prospering, yet he's prospering. Well, they're exaggerating the situation. Jacob saw the attitude of Laban, and behold, surprise, it was not friendly toward him. as formerly. The attitude, that word attitude can also be translated the face of Laban. It was shown in his face. His facial expression was not as it always had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. Now notice that, please. God is still with Jacob. Jacob has divine guidance. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to his flock in the field and said to them, I see your father's attitude, that it is not friendly toward me as formerly, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. You think Jacob's been keeping up with this? You better believe it. He knows exactly how many times his father-in-law has tried to pull a fast one on him. However, God did not allow him to hurt me. You see, the situation that Moses described in the last part of the last chapter is something that was an ongoing process. This thing happened over and over and over again. According to Jacob, it happened 10 times. 10 times. If he spoke thus, the speckled shall be your wages, and all the flock brought forth speckled. And if he spoke thus, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock brought forth striped. In other words, Laban had repeatedly violated the agreement that he had made with Jacob. Thus, God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. God's hand is in this, in other words. And it came about at the time of the flock were mating that I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream. Notice this. He sees in a dream. A dream is a vehicle revelation from God to man at this point. And behold, the male goats which were mating were striped, speckled, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. And I said, here I am. So the angel of the Lord, the angel of God, speaks directly to Jacob in this dream. He said, lift up now your eyes and see that all the male goats which are mating are striped, speckled, and mottled. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. Jacob's success, in other words, is due to God's providence. God's providential hand being with him. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar, where you made a vow to me. Now arise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birth. In other words, don't delay, don't hesitate, go back. Rachel and Leah said to him, do we still have any portion of inheritance in our father's house? Now, notice at this point, whereas Rachel and Leah before had been at each other's throats, it seems, now they're united. Oh, they're right one with each other now. Are we not reckoned by him as foreigners? For he has sold us and has also entirely consumed our purchase price. In other words, we don't have a dowry now. Our dowry is gone. Surely all the wealth which God has taken away from our father belongs to us and our children. Now then, do whatever God has said to you. In other words, we've got something to reckon with our father. He's taken everything that's ours. We've got to handle that. But we're going to go. We're going to go home. Then Jacob arose and put his children and his wives upon camels. And he drove away all his livestock and all his property which he had gathered, his acquired livestock which he had gathered in Padanaram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. When Laban had gone to shear his flock, now that's a 3-day journey that Laban had to do to shear his flock. He's gone for 3 days. This gives Rachel an opportunity. Notice. Then Rachel stole the household idols that were her father's. You think, wait a minute. Jacob is a worshiper of God. And yet Rachel is now stealing the idols of her father? How do you jibe that? Well, think about it. In the ancient Near East, possession of idols that were possessed by a family, if you had possession of the idols, it constituted a basis for both legal and inheritance claims. That is, if a family had house idols, house gods that they worshipped, those idols constituted a legal and an inheritance basis for the offspring to use to make a claim. So Rachel knew this. Rachel was shrewd in that. She knew if she got a hold of those idols, that she would have what had been taken from her and her sister. They would have their money back. She is pulling a fast one on her father, who has pulled a fast one on a lot of people. You see what's going on here? This whole situation is just different to us, to look at this thing. But how different is it, as I mentioned last week, from watching 2020 or Dr. Phil or some of these shows where all this family internecine squabbles get magnified 1,000 times. This is what Moses is doing with all the patriarchs. He's showing how they were human. They were entirely human. Notice further. And Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he was fleeing. So he fled with all that he had, and he arose and crossed the Euphrates River and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. Now, the hill country of Gilead, as Moses describes it, is an entire region. He's going in that direction. This hill country of Gilead is a region extending from the River Jordan east to the desert, and from the northern end of the Dead Sea north to the Sea of Galilee. So it's a region not far from Canaan. That's where he's headed. When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, then he took his kinsman with him and pursued him a distance of 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream of the night and said to him, "Be careful that you do not speak to Jacob either good or bad." You think about having a dream where the Lord appears to you, and in essence he's saying, don't you speak too harshly to that boy. You think about the Lord telling you to do that. Would that not get your attention? Don't speak either good or bad to him. Be careful what you say. You think you wouldn't be careful? Absolutely. Laban caught up with Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen camped in the hill country of Gilead. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done by deceiving me and carrying away my daughters like captives of the sword?" Really, Laban is really trying to say that to his son-in-law. "Why did you flee secretly and deceive me and did not tell me so that I might have sent you away with joy and with songs, with timbrel and with lyre?" Do you think seriously that Laban would have done that? Not on your life. He would not have done that if his life depended on it. Notice, "and did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly." Oh, it's on you. It's not on me. No. Just overlook everything that I've done to you all these years. It's on you. This is all on you. "It is in my power to do you harm." In other words, I've got the power as a patriarch to do anything I want. "But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful not to speak either good or bad to Jacob.'" He knows better than to say something harsh to his son-in-law. But watch this. "Now you have indeed gone away because you long greatly for your father's house." That's attributing wrong motivation to Jacob. That's not the reason why Jacob's going. He's going because the Lord told him, go back to Canaan. "Now you have indeed gone away because," then he says, "but why did you steal my gods?" Here's what's got Laban most concerned. He's not concerned tremendously about the fact that his daughters are leaving home. He's not concerned about the fact that all of his grandsons and his granddaughter are going back with Jacob. No. His main concern above everything else is that his idols are gone from the house. What does that tell you about the character of Laban? Not much. Then Jacob replied to Laban, "Because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. The one with whom you find your gods shall not live." Jacob doesn't know what Rachel's done, in other words. Jacob doesn't know that Rachel has stolen those idols. He has no awareness of it. in the presence of our kinsmen, point out what is yours among my belongings and take it for yourself. Moses adds, for Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So now you've got a situation that is even more fraught with tension. You talk about the tension level going through the roof, you better believe it. If this was shown on a series on television or in a movie, the music would be foreboding music. You know, it would be just dramatic. And rightly so. This is what Moses is doing. Moses not only knows how to paint the picture as far as an eye for detail, Moses knows how to build drama. Moses knows how to tell a story. And he sure is telling it. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the two maids, but he did not find them. And the music, you hear the music building, the foreboding music as he comes to Rachel's tent. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Moses tells us what's taken place up to this point. Now Rachel had taken the household idols and put them in the camel's saddle. And she sat on them. Now what is a camel saddle? Camel saddle is a saddle with a large wicker basket base. So it's big enough to store some things. You see what's fixing to take place? And she sat on them, notice. And Laban felt through all the tent, but did not find them. She said to her father, let not my Lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is upon me. She's using that as an excuse. She's shrewd. She knows what she's doing. She knows how to keep those idols from Laban's eyes and keep him from finding them. So she thinks on her feet as it is. And you can see in your mind's eye how he would then recoil back and leave the tent. And Rachel, exhaling with relief because he doesn't have the idols now. So he searched but did not find the household idols. Then Jacob became angry and contended with Laban. And Jacob said to Laban, what is my transgression? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? Though you have felt through all my goods, what have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. And it's at this point that 20 years of mistreatment now bursts forth from Jacob in a torrent. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten the rams of your flocks. That which was torn of beast I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. You required of it of my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. In other words, I went beyond the requirements that you asked me to follow. Thus I was. By day the heat consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. That's the hardships of being a shepherd. You went through a lot of deprivation, and he did. These 20 years, he repeats it, I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you changed my wages 10 times. You think that Jacob wasn't writing all this down as it was going on? You better believe it. He was keeping up with all that. He knew. He was going to use it at some point with his father-in-law if the time ever came, and now it's come. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac had not been for me, surely now you had sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the toil of my hands. So he rendered judgment last night. In other words, all this that I have is God. God was the one that was responsible for blessing me with all this. So he is emphasizing once again to Laban how that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is far superior to the gods that Laban serves. Then Laban replied to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, and the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. He ain't backing down, to use southern parlance. He ain't backing down off of this. He still claims to have legal rights, but he has no footing on which to stand. He's just trying to save face. But what can I do this day to these my daughters, or to their children whom they have borne? So, now come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. Laban sees that he's not going to get anywhere with Jacob. He also knows, because the Lord appeared to him in that dream, what Jacob is saying is absolutely correct. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is right with Jacob. And he also knows that if he says anything harshly to Jacob, he possibly will be punished directly by God for it. Remember what God had told him. Don't you say anything too harshly to that boy, as we would put it. Don't say anything good or bad to him. You watch yourself, is what the Lord had told him. He knows this. So he's aware he doesn't have the upper hand in this, even though he's saying what he's saying for the benefit of his servants and his people. In other words, he doesn't want to lose face with them, but he knows he's not going to get anywhere with this. Then Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones. So they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. So they have a covenant meal. Remember, the covenant that is made between two parties, you have a meal that you eat, and then you have the ceremony to finalize the covenant. That's what's at work here. They have this covenant meal. Now Laban called it Jigar Sahadutha. That means the heap of witness. That's Aramaic for the heap of witness. But Jacob called it Galid. Galid is Hebrew for the heap of witness. So it's a similar meaning, but two different words, two different phrases that's used to describe this place. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore it was named Galid, Jacob's name that he gives to them, and Mizpah. The word Mizpah means watchtower. Watchtower. For he said, may the Lord watch, notice that, between you and me when we're absent one from the other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. What is he doing? He's asking Jacob to agree to this, which is often a part of marriage contracts in the ancient Near East. Oftentimes, marriage contracts forbade the groom from taking other wives, which is a very common practice. In other words, Laban's asking Jacob, don't take any other wives besides Rachel and Leah. And that's not a difficult thing for Jacob to agree to. So, verse 51, Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold the pillar which I have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass by this heap to you for harm, and you will not pass by this heap and this pillar to me for harm. In other words, I'm not going to attack you, and I ask that you do not attack me. This pillar is the border, the demarcation line. We're not going to pass this mark and attack each other. No vengeance, in other words. And we're not going to take vengeance out against each other from this point on. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So what does Laban appeal to? He appeals to the God of Abraham, yes, but he also appeals to the God of Nahor, the idol god that he still worships. So, Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Notice, Jacob's very specific. He doesn't swear by the God of Nahor. Oh, no. He swears by the fear of his father Isaac, God himself. So the treaty is made. It is sealed by an oath. It is binding. It is legal, as it would be today if two parties were to sign a document and have it stamped. Legally, this is a legal binding agreement. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice. Notice, he offers a sacrifice. He's gracious. His heart's full of gratitude towards the Lord for all of this. A sacrifice on the mountain. And called his kinsmen to the meal. And they ate the meal and spent the night on the mountain. So Jacob is thankful to the Lord. I'm finally free of my father-in-law. Now I and my wives and my children can all live in peace. And we can go home and not worry about that. Oh, but he's got something else to be concerned about, as we're going to see once we get further. Something else that's in the family that's got to be rectified, that's been boiling for 20 plus years. You know who that is. That's Esau. That big difference between them, what happened with, is it connected with Isaac? Esau wanted to kill him. As far as Jacob knows, Esau still wants to kill him. So how's that thing going to be resolved? Notice verse 55 as we close the chapter. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. So that situation is taken care of. The Lord's hand has been with Jacob all the way. And so that situation is now done. It's over. But when we get into chapter 32 in 2 weeks, once I'm back with you, we're going to see this confrontation brewing between Jacob and Esau. Esau has been wanting to kill Jacob. And as I mentioned, as far as Jacob knew at this point, he still wanted to kill him. So how is he going to deal with it? We will see that, and we'll also see an interesting incident recorded by Moses where Jacob wrestles an angel, the Lord. I'll leave that with you